We'll go ahead and continue. We are now, we have done this is something a little different. We have moved our agenda around tonight because I know that so many people are interested in this, so we moved it to the top of the agenda so that everyone could hear this a little earlier than usual. So at this time, we're going to move to 9.0, which is the second reading of the Beechwood Middle School zoning plan. And if you remember, when we rolled this out, we said we would hold the community meetings, which we held, and then we would hold a second reading, and at that point, we would take the advice of the community and the input from the community and massage the rollout of the Beechwood Middle School zoning plan. And then we will, of course, have a third and final reading and actually vote on the final lines next month. So I just wanted to kind of fill you in on where we are on that. So tonight is the second reading. And at this time, I'm going to call on Mr. Salters, who has been heading up this, and let him reveal the second reading.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Little. We appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight early in the agenda. And so just want to review quickly our rationale for attendance lines. Many of the folks in the audience I know have attended our community meetings and heard some of this feedback before, but just quickly, we always, when we enter into these rezonings, we want to try to use our facilities as efficiently as possible. We look to minimize the division of subdivisions where we can, so we want students who live in the same neighborhood to attend the same schools. And of course, we look at student demographics. We want to allow for future growth in our permanent facilities, trying not to overload a facility so that we have to put portables in early in the process of that school being formed. Looking at transportation patterns, and then we do also try to utilize natural boundaries and roadways where possible so that they make sense when you're looking at a map. And then we also, in this rezoning, are trying to provide some reduced enrollment at Lexington Middle and Pleasant Hill Middle as we go forward. So just to kind of recap the current middle school attendance lines with Pleasant Hill, I'm pointing over here, Pleasant Hill on the left, and then Lexington Middle School here in the middle, this blue, and then Meadow Glen on the right. And you see some slightly different numbers from the community meetings as we've had some slight shifts in enrollment from those meetings. So those reflect current enrollments at those facilities. And so at first reading, just to recap briefly, these were the proposed attendance lines for first reading, and these were the lines that we went to the community with to seek feedback. And you can see that center line right there, that is the high school attendance line. So just to recap, these lines would create true feeder patterns with the left side of that line, Beechwood and Pleasant Hill being Lexington High School, the right side of that line being Lexington Middle and Meadow Glen. Those would feed River Bluff. And so after hearing the feedback from the community at those meetings and looking at different options going forward, the recommendation before you this evening is to consider in this rezoning effort to, whoops, hit the wrong button there, to consider leaving the Meadow Glen attendance area intact and only affecting the left side of this area here. So Beechwood zone would be made up of a portion of Lexington Middle School. Pleasant Hill would be made up of a portion of Lexington Middle School as well. Again, we would keep that true high school feeder pattern. So all of these students on this side of the line would continue to go to Lexington High School. So all of Beechwood and all of Pleasant Hill would go to Lexington High School. Lexington Middle School for the next couple of years would be a smaller enrollment. We feel like that's going to work out well with the transportation pattern changes that are going to begin to occur this summer according to the town's timeline. There in front of Lexington Middle School and Lexington Elementary School. That's going to help with that traffic flow in that area while that construction occurs. And then also just leaving the attendance area for Meta Glen, again, untouched. So this line that exists here now is the current attendance zone for Meta Glen. So what that does is it allows all of the Meta Glen Elementary School students to go to Meta Glen Middle School as they are currently now. That was one of the pieces of feedback. We had some immersion-related feedback. And so basically this leaves that area untouched. And so, again, Lexington Middle School, 623 students. Beechwood anticipated around 900. And then Pleasant Hill, 717. And if you recall, Beechwood is being designed for 1,200 student initial capacity and then can go up to 1,500. And eventually that's what the Lexington Middle School plan will also be built as it comes on board in a couple of years.
And remind us again the number of students at Meta Glen Middle?
It's 1040.
1040 today.
Mm-hmm. And so Meta Glen Middle School will continue to grow over the next couple of years before the new Lexington Middle School opens. However, there is some benefit of the sixth grade class, the rising sixth grade class, the current fifth graders. That class is a little bit smaller than the eighth graders leaving. You throw the growth in there, and so we're gonna see some growth there still, but it won't be a crazy number over the next 2 years until we can get the new Lexington Middle School open and then address the right side of this area at that time. So again, just to recap, from the elementary feeder pattern standpoint, schools feeding Beechwood Middle would be Rocky Creek Elementary, Lake Murray, and New Providence Elementary Schools, a portion of that. Lexington Middle School would be portions of New Providence, Lexington, and Midway. Pleasant Hill would be all of Pleasant Hill Elementary, and then a portion of Deerfield and Lexington Elementaries. And just note that Meta Glen is taken off of this feeder pattern because their feeder pattern remains unchanged, as we aren't moving that line or proposing not to move that line at this time. And again, I recap briefly here, all of Meta Glen and Lexington Middle would go to River Bluff, all of Beechwood and Pleasant Hill would go to Lexington High School.
Mr. Salters, can you explain why we believe the true feeder pattern is an advantage over the split feeder pattern that we currently have?
Yes, sir. At the high school level, students in your middle schools really start getting connected with their high schools through sports, through academic clubs, through fine arts involvement as well. And so as they begin to create those connections, it's a lot easier for them to transition to the high school that they make those connections with. And so when their whole school is going that way, it really helps with that middle to high school transition. We find that that's a little bit more challenging of a time for students than that elementary to middle school transition because you have all those connections that you're establishing. So I feel like that's a really positive thing for our students going forward to be able to get that true feeder in there. And we are proposing the grandfathering option that we've discussed remaining if the attendance lines show that a current 7th grader would be rezoned. They could elect to stay their 8th grade year to finish out that year. There isn't an option to provide transportation, but they could attend that zone. That also holds true for their siblings as well. And again, just to recap key dates, we're well on our way down this list. We're here at second reading at the bottom of the list here, and then, of course, third reading would be scheduled for the March 19th regular board meeting at this time. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Remind us again the projected opening date for the new Lexington Middle School or the relocated Lexington Middle School.
It's 2 years out, so it'll be August of 21.
Okay, and we will be looking at lines at that point in time.
We would be for the right-hand side of
Right.
the attendance area. Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
And one thing I want to share, I just want to thank everybody that contributed information because that really helped the board work with Mr. Salters and his team to change some of the lines and make some adjustments. But the one thing that's really hard for us as a board, we heard from several people that stated, I bought my house so that I would go to this school. You just have to remember, you bought your house in Lexington 1. You didn't buy your house to go to a certain school. And I hate to tell you that, but with us growing 500 children a year, it's just really hard for us to, we just can't load a school up and then have another school, you know, sitting medium full versus extremely full. There's no school in Lexington 1 that's empty or less full. So I just want to state, I know that sounds, but we're all so blessed. All the schools in Lexington 1 are so wonderful. And don't panic if your child ends up going to another school in Lexington 1. You're still in Lexington 1, and that's something to be proud of.
Ms. Smith, if I could add that between now and the third reading of the budget, of course, we have a citizens participation in just a minute, but we also have our link available on the website. This presentation will be available, and so as we seek input for these lines now, that link for feedback is still available, and of course, citizens can reach out that way, or obviously contact, I'm sure, you folks, as well as our staff here, and we'll be glad to record that feedback and share that with you between now and third reading as well.
Well, and to that point, for many of you that contacted us, I had a few questions like, does the board get the information that we fill out on the contact sheet on the website, or do we get all the emails? And I can assure you that we did. I mean, many of us were able to attend most or all of the community meetings, and the feedback forms there, along with what was submitted online, as well as some of the emails and phone calls, were compiled. And I think the last compilation we got was I think 27 pages of maybe 6 or 7 point font of every single comment that was submitted. And so we do take those, and those do play a big role in the changes that you see here. So know that your voice is heard and it matters. And so if you have any questions or concerns about this new rendering, please don't hesitate to let us know, because we are here to try and do what's best for our community. So, and I think that this new design really does show responsiveness to a lot of the concerns, very valid concerns that were raised about traffic patterns and drop-offs and just crazy logistics. And you know, it's proof that you can draw something on paper, but then when you live it, it's a little different than what you sometimes see on the paper. So please just speak up again. We've got another month until we take the third reading, and so we would love to, you know, and if you love this, let us know, because, you know, affirmative feedback is just as good as negative feedback. Thank you.
And just a point of information, you all have a map like this at your place, and these maps are available. They weren't available when you came in, but they'll be available on the table as you leave. It has a little bit, you know, better image of the lines and where they are. So feel free to pick that up on the way out. And as we said, this presentation will be available as well for you.
And if I may take a point of privilege, I believe our middle school principals are here that are impacted. And would y'all stand and wave your hand? And if anybody wants to, I think Ms. Jenkinson, Dr. Rivers, Dr. Kuhn. So if anybody wants to speak with them, they're available as well as the board and Mr. Salters and Dr. Little. Dr. Powers, did you have a question?
Well, two things. One, obviously the elephant in the room is Meadow Glen Middle still going to have to deal with a large census. So ironically, before the rezoning, we got a lot of feedback around the crowding at Meadow Glen. So I want to thank Dr. Kuhn and his team managing that, because obviously you've got a full campus. So, and we're aware of that. And, you know, again, that's why we're building a new middle school. And then secondly, I'm excited, you know, we've had this partnership with Palmetto College, and, you know, we're hosting that on Lexington Middle's campus. So it'll be interesting over the next year or two how we can continue to expand that as we look at the enrollment and the efficacy of that, because we'll have some capacity on that campus. And I know that was a great partnership with the town and the county in bringing adult education here to Lexington County. So I think strategically this also gives us a window to kind of leverage that. So,
Board, are there any other questions or comments?
Just I guess a comment and a question. Can you pull up your
Sure.
calendar, your map? Yes. The Augusta Highway, as you see it at the Pisgah Church intersection?
Yeah, right in here.
Correct. If you were to extend that, if you were to use Augusta Highway, rough idea, is there a rough idea of the number of students that would be within that pocket in the lower?
This lower
the
pocket right
lower
here.
field? Yes, sir.
I have to get you that number. I can tell you the reason that that line extends the way it does down here is similar to the circumstances we had on this side of the attendance area. This is all of the Rocky Creek Elementary School students, and so that mirrors the Rocky Creek Elementary
Gotcha.
attendance lines.
Gotcha.
And so those students are already going north to Rocky Creek, and then it's just a mile or so away, well, it's about 2 miles probably, over to Beechwood, kind of in that same general direction versus going up to Rocky Creek and back over to Pleasant Hill. So that's a similar idea. But
So it's maintaining that feeder is what
Yes,
you're
sir.
getting there. Gotcha. All right. And then.
I'll be happy to get you that number of students.
No,
Okay.
that's not necessary. Thank you. And I guess, from an observation, this is obviously first time a few of us have gone through this type of process. And I think the thing I learned from this is if we look at the map and we look at it in a left to right progression, that tends to be the natural flow of our life. Regardless of what we think in Lexington, I don't know if we'll ever get away from the reality that we are still a suburb, if you will, of Columbia. And so that natural flow goes left to right. And so I think when you can maintain that, that kind of fits with our natural flow of life. And I think that was essentially what the feedback we were getting really kind of centered around was the sometimes the difficulty in sort of maneuvering the flow of life, if you will, as we go from the outskirts of Lexington towards, be it Lexington Medical Center, be it downtown Columbia, wherever parents may work. And so, definitely a hard task nonetheless. And one thing I did kind of come to appreciate, the challenge of trying to force against that flow of life. And sometimes I think you can accomplish that, and sometimes I frankly think you can't. And some of that's just positional based on where the schools are at existing. And so definitely a challenge that I think has been seen and addressed.
Thank you, Dr. Guyton. Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. We had a comment about the area from Bar Road to South Lake Drive that was rezoned from Lexington Middle to Pleasant Hill Middle, and that would be coming down Old Chapin right there. Mm-hmm. Well, the lady made a good point. She said that area is closer to Lexington Middle School, and they travel in the opposite direction to go to work. So right there across from Kmart in Lexington, that area behind Lexington Medical Center. And those students, some of them had the same concerns as parents in the Meadow Glen attendance area. And I feel like we may not be hearing them because there's not as many of them, and that's a small area. And basically it's just a lower socioeconomic status. So I'm not even sure those people have the opportunity to provide feedback online, or that, I don't know if Facebook is the only way
Mr. Salters,
and the
do you have any?
website that we got this information out to those people.
No, ma'am. We sent it out through our schools and communicated the community meetings, and we actually received feedback from a number of folks in that area. And we've looked at the student population in that area as a result of that feedback. I think I'm going off of memory, but I think there's about 18 middle school students total in that community. And that, that's something that can be looked at again between readings. It would, if you recall, it would not preserve the true high school feeder pattern if you do that, because this is the high school line. Those students in this area are going to Lexington High School for their high school, so they are already going to the left, if you will, for high school attendance, which is actually further than traveling to Pleasant Hill. So they're oriented, the way they already are for high school, and that was the mindset behind that. But that's certainly something that can be looked at further for third reading.
But from what I understand from the feedback, the elementary students would still be going to Lexington Elementary, and then the middle school students would be at Pleasant Hill Middle. So it'd kind of be the Meadow Glen thing all over again, where parents are driving to
could be.
Lexington Elementary. Yeah, so that was one of my concerns. Kyle was talking about kind of the same area I was, going down Highway 1. The area from Pisgah Church Road towards Gilbert down Highway 1 was rezoned from Pleasant Hill Middle to Beechwood Middle. And there was, I mean, the way it looks, those people are just closer. I know a few of them had mentioned that they would be driving in the opposite direction to go to Beechwood Middle instead of to Pleasant Hill Middle. And do I understand that Pleasant Hill Elementary, is that a Spanish immersion school?
It is.
Okay. And Pleasant Hill Middle is also, but Beechwood Middle is not.
Not Spanish immersion.
Right, so then we have that same problem that we have with Meadow Glen, where we're taking students out of immersion or just not providing transportation for them. So that's a major concern that I have. And also the Shoal Island Shore Road area, all of the feedback I got from that, everyone in that area wants to be zoned for Beechwood Middle. And I don't know if you just want to offer them school choice or how we can talk about that, but there was a lot of feedback.
We actually have the data on the whole point, where all of those middle school students are going currently, that we can share with you for your consideration. I think you'll be interested in knowing where they're currently going to school.
Well, yeah, according to a lot of them, they're already going to Lexington Middle, correct?
There are a few that are going there. They're scattered,
Yeah,
and I can share that information with you.
yeah, that would be great to have.
Anything else, Ms. Garris?
I'm just, from this point forward, I think instead of just looking at demographics and subdivisions and road boundaries, we're gonna have to start looking at the programs offered at the schools. To me, it's just unfair to rezone immersion students and not offer transportation or some kind of after-school program. And I didn't know it until one of the parents brought it up at one of the community meetings, but they entered into a long-term commitment. And Lexington One states in that commitment, it will be detrimental to all parties involved in the program for parents not to fulfill this commitment. So with the Pleasant Hill and other areas, I just think that needs to be taken into consideration when we rezone.
Anything else, Ms. Garris?
I think that's it.
Okay. Anything else, board? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Salters, and thank you to your team. And again, community members, this is the second reading. We are not voting tonight, and at this point, we would love to hear from you about the second reading and the changes that we're proposing. The changes we're proposing right now are what we've settled on for tonight. But if you want to comment and get back with the board and the superintendent and Dr. and Mr. Salters, we would love to hear from you and get your feedback. And then we will take a final vote at our March meeting. And then, of course, this we will roll out in the fall when we open up Beechwood. So just to let you know, we are all ears. We definitely want to indicate to you that we are listening. We do appreciate all your feedback, and I think I've shared this with you. Lexington's gotten to be so big that I know when I pull out of my driveway in the morning what things are like, but I don't often know when you pull out of your driveway what it's like traffic-wise, what it's like neighborhood-wise, what it's like children in your neighborhood. So we really, really appreciate you telling us what you think will work best for your family, because we are here to make things as easy as possible for your family. It's just our only dilemma is we are adding 500 children a year, and it's very hard to keep up with the growth. So that's our dilemma, but we promise we hear you and we want to work with all of you.
And
So-
Ms. Smith, if you don't mind, I'll just add a comment. I think I mentioned this to you last week. About 2 weeks ago, I was dropping my 8th grader off at MGM in the morning, and we were pulling in maybe a few minutes late, but there were 3 cars in front of me, and all 3 of those cars that were in front of me dropping off students all had non-South Carolina license plates. There was an Oregon, there was a Virginia, and I think maybe a Kentucky or a Tennessee. And so I think the secret has gotten out. And actually today I was on a field trip And the other mom that was on the field trip, bless her, her son was on a different field trip, and she had committed and still went on the field trip today, even though her child wasn't there. But she moved, her family moved from Alabama to South Carolina 5 years ago, and her husband's territory is the whole state of South Carolina, and she has 4 children, and she researched all of the available school districts and picked Lexington 1. And so I think that is a testimony to what we're doing, but it also is evidence of the fact that, you know, folks are coming. And so we just have to appreciate that blessing, and then just do the best we can to deal with it. So.